Hey, what's up, everyone? Ralph here. So, have you ever spent money that you know you shouldn't, but found a good excuse to do it anyways? Right? I think we've all been there, right? We've all been put in a situation where if you've screwed up when it came to your finances, like during that process, you found excuses for every purchase that you made, right? And for a lot of people, this is where a lot of people get in trouble. And in this video, what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the things people say to themselves that helps justify their poor spending habits. Okay. And the way I want to do is that I want to break it down into 4 sections, right? 4 sections where each section has things people say that justify their poor spending. So the first thing I want to talk about is logic, right? The things people say to convince themselves why they should make this type of purchase. All right. The next section is guilt-free spending. People have this thing in their head where, they feel guilty, but they find a way to convince themselves that this is a good purchase. Okay. Next thing is emotional support spending, and the last section is the danger zone. Danger zone spending, where they just people throw logic out the window and then make that purchase anyways. Right. So we're gonna start out with the first one, which is logic, right? Where people find ways to convince themselves why this is a good purchase. Okay. So some of the things that people say is, I'm sure we all notice, is it's on sale. Right? We find a way to say, all right, since it's on sale, I'm saving money. However, you're spending money anyways. You're spending money that you don't have. But being able to say, oh, it's 30% off, 40% off, and it's on sale, we find a way to justify that spending, and we make that purchase anyways, even though we know it's not good for us long term. Okay. Another thing is, it's not a purchase, but it's an investment. Now, for me personally, investment is, you get a return on investment. Like that investment is making you money. Unless, obviously it's something where it's a learning, where you're reading books, or it's training, where you're investing in yourself. But other than that, anything you purchase, unless it's making you money, I don't really consider that an investment. But these are the things people say in order to justify that spending. Another thing is, people say is, I'll use it every day. All right. And then months later, it's collecting dust in people's closets. Right. But this is right at the time of purchase. They say, yeah, I'm going to use it every day. So it says, like, makes them feel good that, I'm going to use this, and it'll justify that spending. But then months later, you find that same product just collecting dust. All right. And lastly, it'll save me money in the long run. Right. So for example, you buy a coffee machine, right? You want to stop buying coffee at Starbucks, so you buy a coffee machine, and then over the long run, it's gonna save you money, right? And it makes kind of sense. However, if you're using it here and there, and you're still finding time to buy coffee at Starbucks, then it really kind of defeats the purpose, right? And a lot of people do this. We all do this all the time. It's like we want to save money, so we buy something where it says, hey, over time in the long run, it's going to make sense. And then you're still doing the same things, like buying coffee when you have that coffee machine at your house, but you don't use it as much as you should, and it still costs you the money, and you're still spending money that you don't have. All right. So the next one is guilt-free spending, right? You got that little voice in your head that's telling you shouldn't buy it, right? You're feeling guilty, but then you find ways to say, you know what? I'm going to spend the money anyways. And you find a way to convince yourself, right? So the first one, everyone else has one, right? And since everyone has it, then it makes sense. It's not going to be as bad as if I get it, right? It only makes sense, right? If everyone else has it, that it must be a good purchase. So why not get it? Because it seems like a smart purchase, right? So this is just one thing that people say. Another thing is, I never spend money on myself, right? And then you look in your house and you look at your credit card bill. It seems like all you do is spend money on yourself, right? But these are the things that people say to convince themselves to make a purchase. The next thing is, it's not that expensive. Right, we've all been there, right? We want to buy something. So it's not that bad relative to something else. It's not that bad. So, why not buy it, right? I think I'm still saving money in the long run. And finally, I'll make up for it by eating at home this week while you're confirming your DoorDash purchase, right? Because if you're gonna make the excuse that, I'll just eat at home, but then you're still ordering from DoorDash, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? You might as well just go eat out in a restaurant, right? It's the same thing. You're still gonna have to tip. You're still wasting money, right? The purpose is, if you're gonna eat at home, the goal is to make sure you save money by cooking your meals at home, right? Not ordering out and spending more money, right? You're still wasting money, spending money that you don't have. Okay. Now, next we got emotional support spending, right? And this is the type of spending where people use self-care. They use, therapy, or a way to cope with whatever they're going through, right? So they use that emotional spending. A lot of people use this as a way to feel better about themselves, right? So one of the things they say is retail therapy is cheaper than real therapy, right? And we all know how that is. Where for a lot of people, they're stressed out, and one way to make them feel better or get over that stress is to buy something. Okay. And the problem with this is obviously every time you feel bad, you're developing a habit where every time I feel this way, I might as well just make a purchase to feel good, right? And we all know that dopamine hit, it doesn't last that long. So every time you get that feeling, your first step is to make a purchase. And over time, you can rack up a lot of debt. And a lot of people do this in a way where they get themselves in financial trouble, where every time they're struggling, they don't feel right. They do this retail therapy where they go shopping, and for that time being, they feel better about themselves. And we all know that leads in trouble long term. Next is, I had a rough week. I earned this. Okay. And this is for a lot of people, like where, what they say that, whatever their job is stressing them out. And they find a way to say, you know what, I worked hard this week. I'm going to earn it. I've earned this. So I've earned whatever it is I'm buying. And they find that's one way they feel like, you know what, I've found a way to justify the spending. So, I put in a lot of work this week, and sometimes it makes sense, but you want to be more responsible with it. Right. So you got to be careful with that. Next thing is, it makes me happy, right? It makes me happy. So since it makes me happy, I'm going to make this purchase. And for a lot of people struggle to find happiness. So shopping, spending is some way to make them feel happy. So you also got to be careful with that emotion too, because for a lot of people, they're just unhappy, and for them is finding a way to cope and say, all right, what can make me happy and make me feel good in the moment? And shopping is usually, spending money is a good way to do that. Okay, and finally, YOLO, right? We've all done this. You only live once. A lot of people say you can't take the money with you, which I get. I understand that. And look, money is meant to be spent. But the thing is, you want to be responsible with the way you spend that money. Okay, if you have it, then spend it and be responsible, right? You don't want to be like, oh, you got the money, just spend it, and then you're not taking care of the things that you need to take care of, and you find yourself struggling financially. You don't want to do that. Be responsible with the way you do it, and obviously, if the thing I would do is that if put it in buckets, right? Whatever your paycheck is, whatever after all your bills are paid, allocate a bucket and say, hey, if you want to create a I deserve it fund. Right? Put like 5-10% of your money into that I deserve it fund. Whatever's in that fund, you can use it to do whatever you want without worrying about feeling guilty. So you want to make sure you be careful with that. And finally, it's the danger zone, right? This is the danger zone where all logic is thrown out the window. Logic is gone. They don't even care. It's just done. Logic is done. They're just doing they're just spending because they're just reckless. So the first thing people say is it wasn't real money, it was credit, right? And people get in trouble with this all the time, especially with credit cards. It's like it's not real money, so they spend it anyways, and then, until they get that bill, and it's like, damn, I owe this much. Like it's easy to spend money that's not really there. Like you swipe the credit card, it's a very easy thing to do. That's why if you're someone that can't use a credit card, don't use it. Use cash, because whatever's in your bank account, that's what you're using. Next, we got I'll figure it out later, right? And a lot of people do this. It's like, I don't want to have to deal with this. I'll make this purchase and then I'll figure out what to do with how to make this, how to pay it off, at another time. And finally, this payment plan is only $30 a month, right? For the next 72 months. And this is the thing, like $30 is not a lot. But however, when you're doing this often, and you see this with the buy now, pay later, a lot of people are doing this for a bunch of purchases where they're breaking up the purchases, and because it's very small, it's easy to rack up more debt over time. And it's gotten to a point where people are financing like takeout, like they're fast food, like they can go on Klarna and they can finance their fast food meals. So all it's doing is getting people in the habit of building up more debt. Right. And I think DoorDash partnered with one of these buy now, pay later, Klarna or something like that, where you can finance your food. They're gonna finance everything now, and this is where more people are gonna get into financial trouble because it's an easy thing to do. So the thing is, I think the main thing is to understand is like, look, we've all been there, right? When it comes to finances, we all been in situations where we've been reckless with our money. Even myself, like I'm guilty of it as well. And then it's about developing better. It's about developing better habits. And when I always talk about when it comes to managing your money, it's simple math, right? Spend less than you make. Okay, money coming in, money going out, right? The goal is to you want to make sure the money going out is less than the money coming in. Right? And once you do that, you're fine, right? And some of the things that I like to always, like principles I like to always keep in the back of my mind is like I don't finance anything that doesn't make me money, right? Outside of a home, right? I don't finance anything if it's not making me money, if it's not giving me a return on investment. And that's one thing I've always kept in my mind, to make sure I don't get into financial trouble. Another thing is like pay off your credit cards, pay off the credit card balance every month, right? And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be having a credit card. Okay. If you can't, if you find yourself like, you spent, that balance is whatever the balance is on that credit card and you can't pay that, then you shouldn't be using that credit card. Get rid of the credit card because you can't handle it. Like I don't care what the interest rate on a credit card is. I don't pay that interest rate because I always pay my balance every month. Whatever that balance is, whatever I spend, that's what I have. Boom, I pay it off because I'm not paying any interest. Right. And that's something that you got to do. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be having a credit card. Okay. So look at the goal is to be responsible with your money. Like I said, it's just developing. It's about managing your money. It's about developing good habits and really having an understanding if you're disciplined when it comes to how you manage money. So you do that. Like I said, if you manage it and you're disciplined, then you should be fine. So those are my thoughts. Interested to hear your thoughts. Make sure to leave a comment down below, hit the like button, share. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe. Right. So you guys take care and have a good one later.